This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by corporate board member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. I'm TK Kerstetter with Corporate Board Member, and we have a great show today. We're going to be talking about investor relations and how that has changed over the last couple of years and its relationship between the board and the IR professionals. So with me, joining me, I'm happy to invite my guests. First of all, to my immediate left is Barbara Gasper, who's the Group Executive and Senior Vice President of Investor Relations for MasterCard Incorporated. And joining her today and us is Mark Schwartz, who's the board member of MasterCard, also is the chair of the audit committee, and is a member of the nominating governance committee. So welcome, folks.
Thank you, TK.
Thanks, TK.
It is rare for us to have both sides represented. So this is terrific. We're going to get to have a little interchange here. And we know that the environment has changed. We know that now we're in a situation where there's a very bright light on boards. It seems like everything is transparent. There's still continued push for transparency. But what I'd really like to understand is, as a place for us to start, is Mark, what is your expectation of the investor relations person? And then we'll turn that, and Barbara, I'll ask you, for you to get your job done, what is your expectation of the board? So Mark, let's start with you.
Thanks, TK. And thanks for having us here today. So our expectation of Barbara is that she be very expertised in our business. We're in the payments industry. We need Barbara to understand our strategy. We need her to understand our organization, our culture. We need her to be very familiar with senior management, with the entire workforce, and with our board. And with that, we need her to be effective in her job, to be able to communicate our strategy, our vision to the marketplace, to big institutional investors around the world. We need her to be a very effective communicator of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we expect to be successful, and how we expect to be successfully representing our shareholders.
And Barbara, when the shoe's on the other foot, what's your expectation to be able to do that from the board?
Well, I look to board members to be the source of knowledge and information for me and for my team. They provide a lot of experience. We've got a globally diversified board, so I've got board members that come from all corners of the world, all different kinds of backgrounds. So it's that experience they have, it's that global perspective that they bring that helps me be sure that we are articulating the MasterCard strategy and position to global shareholders and not just stay focused perhaps on the US when we're looking at a global shareholder base. So for example, one of the things that we do is a day or two before earnings each quarter, we will have a meeting with the audit committee. And while we don't get into wordsmithing the earnings script, we do talk about the messages that we plan to articulate to the investment community. We look at the board members to push back on us, to be a good sounding board, to be essentially a test audience to see how those messages sound to them. They are familiar with the company. They do have background in the financials. They're not down in the weeds of putting the messaging together, but we can use them as a sounding board to be sure that what we're saying is going to resonate well and reflect well on MasterCard.
So Barbara, what is, in doing that, and I'll ask the same question of you, Mark, what is your biggest challenge, day-to-day challenge in doing that, in dealing with the board of directors?
Part of the day-to-day challenge is just getting into the day-to-day responsibilities of investor relations and answering the calls and being on the front line and being able to have the time to step back, to reach out. I am fortunate to have a board that looks for information, that wants me to be proactive, is interested in what we're hearing as an IR team. So I reach out to them, but I also have members who reach out to me. So that give and take is there, and I'm thankful that they do that reach out, because sometimes my time is so focused on reaching out to investors that I don't always have the time to reach out to the board members. And their time is valuable, and they're busy people as well.
Mark, how about the other way?
The other way, I'd firstly say Barbara is very visible to us at the board and at the audit committee. We see her throughout the year. So we know she's a very important senior member of our management team. The greatest challenge is business conditions are changing so rapidly every day that we're reacting as a board and as a senior management team to those changing conditions every day. And we need to be able to be confident that how we're reacting is being communicated effectively to the marketplace. So we need to know we have deep, meaningful, continuous relationships with the biggest investors around the world, because we're expanding our business globally, and we know our shares are being bought and distributed globally. So we need to know that we're communicating around the globe every day as business conditions are changing.
Well, we have said all year long that communications, that the biggest evolution has been the communications with shareholders about multiple things. And we won't take the time on this to review that, but that has clearly been one of the biggest messages that we've been delivering during the course of the year. Mark, I want to ask you this. You can weigh in too, Barbara, but when you look, Mark, as a director, on all that's happened in this, we've seen regulations come down, and we've seen proxy access end up in the courts. We've seen, Occupy Wall Street. You've seen this sort of environment. When you look into the boardroom part of that, what sort of worries you about trends, okay? And then I'll ask you the reverse side of that. What encourages you about trends?
Well, I'd say the greatest challenge we have at MasterCard right now, when we look around the world and we look at all the factors impacting our business, I would say one of the things the board is most concerned about, most focused on, is how regulation is impacting our business globally. And it's not that we're over-regulated or under-regulated. It's the fact that regulations are changing so much in so many jurisdictions in which we operate around the world. So, for example, this year alone, there was very important, meaningful congressional legislation which impacted the U.S. payments industry. But also there's a lot of regulatory oversight and actions this past year by the EU. So all of our businesses in Europe are being impacted by changing regulation. And we see this in almost every country we operate. And so we've got to be very attentive to governments, to regulators, to regulatory jurisdictions, and so many around the world. It complexifies our business. That's been one of our greatest challenges this last year, and promises to be a continuing challenge in the future.
And that doesn't even count the governance regulations that have created a lot of work for you.
Absolutely right.
So how about on the encouraging side? When you sit there as a director and look, what gives you comfort sort of looking forward?
Well, I'd say we are operating at MasterCard in a big growth industry, the payments industry, and we're benefiting very greatly by global growth. I often think that the payments industry is, in a sense, a good proxy for global growth. If you believe in global growth, we believe MasterCard will be a terrific stock and a terrific equity to own, because we're reflecting a lot of that global growth. So we're hugely encouraged by global growth. We're operating in a very competitive industry, but the competition in our industry, we believe, is making us better. It's making us react more quickly. It's making us more creative, more innovative, more adaptive, and it's really bringing out the very best in us. So We love that we're in a very, very rapidly growing industry around the world. We love the impact of technology in our business, and we've been able to use technology to enhance our business model, we think very successfully. And we're benefiting from all the competition because it's making us be smarter, quicker, more creative, more innovative.
What worries you, Mark, about the governance side, though? What worries you when you look at what's happening in the boardroom, or what encourages you? That was a little bit about the business, but what worries you about the regulation and the proxy access and the activists and that part of it?
Every company right now, we think, is being affected by the overwhelming amount of immediate access to information. So that creates an enormous challenge. I mean, how can we possibly be reacting as a global business operating in 100 countries around the world? How can you really be reacting instantaneously to a flood of information coming at us every day? And great challenges coming at us every day. So, for example, in Europe, we're very, very aware of all of the pressures in the Eurozone. We have important relationships in all the European countries with many, many important European financial institutions, and we're deeply concerned. How can we be monitoring credit risk in every country? How can we be on top of things when there's so much happening on a continuous basis 24/7 and so much information available not only to us, but to our competitors, to regulators, to shareholders, to all of our stakeholders? How can we capture all of this information, make the right judgments at our board, at our senior management level? How can we react smartly, prudently, thoughtfully to really manage all of the risk attendant to us around the world? That's the greatest challenge in the boardroom.
Well, everybody that's happy about social media, about what it does, the downside of that is you could get on a plane, and by the time you get off the plane, the whole world could have
The world will have changed meaningfully in just those 6 or 12 hours.
Yeah.
We're very, very aware of it.
Well, we only have a couple minutes left, but I wanted to ask this question because I think this is going to be a trend going into next year. The idea of the fifth analyst call, of the idea of having directors and speaking directly to shareholders is something that a lot of people are going to push. They want to talk to that head of the audit committee. They want to talk to that head of the comp committee. How do you guys feel about that? What's your general positives or negatives relative to this? Because people are saying there could be pitfalls here. So have you discussed this at all, or share with the audience, if you would, how you guys feel about that?
Well, I will say that as a relatively new public company, we went public 5.5 years ago, we haven't seen, up until this point, a lot of that. But one of the things that we have tried to do is to take the approach of providing the opportunity to have constructive dialogue so that you don't have investors who feel that the only opportunity they have to express their views or talk to a director is at the annual shareholders meeting. So that we try to have this informed dialogue. When somebody reaches out to us, we will get right on it, call them back, get the appropriate people on the phone. And one of the things that we've learned from that is, in some areas, we found that investors think we're doing a better job than we give ourselves credit for. In fact, we had an interesting call from a European investor about 3 weeks ago who's on anti-corruption practices. And they said, after this call, we feel that you're one of the best in class. You really should advertise that more. Put some of that stuff on your website. So we went from having none of that on the website to finding out what investors are looking for. So what we've tried to do is provide avenues for dialogue, for information, so that investors can reach out and get some of that information before they feel that they have to demand it and use the annual meeting as their only outlet for getting that.
Mark, I'm sorry.
No.
How do you feel about going in front of that, where they want to speak to the audit chair, where traditionally, attorneys would have not recommended that
Sure.
directors go in front of that. But there's certainly a push in that direction.
TK shareholders are a lot more informed nowadays than ever before. They're a lot more activist, and they want as much information and as much access as they can possibly get. We haven't really faced activist shareholders in many of the ways that other companies have. I think for one primary reason. I should say for two primary reasons. One, in the 5.5 years since we've been public, our company has grown very significantly. Our share price is up 8 or 9-fold in these 5.5 years, which is especially significant given how challenging the macroeconomic environment has been. So we've gotten and extracted a lot of growth for our shareholders. So we've preempted, I think, a lot of the concern that shareholders might have. But the second reason is, I think, because Barbara does her job so very effectively. She's constantly talking to shareholders. We're not providing access once a year at an annual shareholders meeting. Barbara's constantly interfacing with shareholders on a daily and weekly basis. She's bringing our senior management team around the world, meeting these shareholders. We're activists ourselves in getting the story out, in being responsive, in listening carefully to what our shareholders want and expect of us. And TK, we think at MasterCard we're delivering the results.
Well, Barbara, this is on tape now, so there is your performance review on
Thank
tape.
you, Mark.
There's no way we can erase that, so that's the good part about that. But we have heard good things about the governance program at MasterCard, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have you guys on here, and I appreciate that. I have a couple announcements before we send our group off, but I wanted to thank you both for taking the time to come down here and join us.
Thanks, TK.
Thank you, TK.
There is a couple things that before we depart here, that I want to make sure that we get across. A lot of you have heard about our board education program. You will be receiving additional information on that, but that gives unlimited access to a board to all the events that Corporate Board Member does. And just as a reminder of that, we have our West Coast Summit and Peer Exchange coming up on February 28th and March 1st in Phoenix, Arizona. We also have back-to-back events. Our Risk Oversight event is here at the Exchange on April 3rd, and our Comp Strategies to Increase Shareholder Value is April 4th. Those of you that are members, again, you're more than welcome. Make sure your board is taking advantage of that. If you're not a part of the board education program, we'll be glad to talk to you about that. So with that, that concludes our show for today. Once again, we'll be back next week to cover topics that we think are important for you to be a better board member or a better committee member, and we will see you next week.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by Corporate Board Member and host NYSE Euronext, along with Governance Knowledge Partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.